Good afternoon, everyone. Let me do. I'm just looking for start the broadcast. Oh, great. Yeah, I'm sorry, Kenny. I'm just looking for start the broadcast. That's all I'm looking for.
Well, I can't see everything. I don't think on my end, so I don't know where to tell you to go.
Right. Okay. All right, hang on. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Looks like we are going to go ahead and start. If you can hear me, if someone could just type in a question letting me know that, I certainly would appreciate it. We are going to start off here with our first installment in our lubrication series, where we dedicated the entire month to condition-based lubrication and improving lubrication practices in your facility. And we're going to start that today with some people that I've known for several years now, great people at Hydrotex Lube. And we have Mr. Ken Foley here, who is going to present on ways that your Lube Tech can improve reliability in your facility. And just starting off here with a little bit about UE Systems. We've been around since 1973, so we have over 40 years now experience with ultrasound, and we have a large global footprint, so really no matter where you are, we have people that can come in and support you, as well as we have now 14 regional offices here in the U.S., as well as support internationally. You will have the opportunity to type in questions as we go through the presentation today, so feel free to do that and we'll get those answered. And then we'll also be recording this webinar, and we'll have that up on the website within just a few days. So again, we appreciate that, and I'm going to now turn things over to Ken Foley with Hydrotex Lube.
Okay, I hope I've done everything correctly there. Hope everybody can see the screen. And I want to say a special thanks to Adrian and to UE Systems, and also to Maureen for giving us the opportunity to participate in this webinar. And the title of the webinar is Ways a Lube Tech Can Improve Your Reliability Program. Initially, I titled it 10 Ways, and quickly came up with a lot more than 10 ways. So I just decided to say that it was just ways that a Lube Tech can improve your reliability program. As Adrian said, my name is Ken Foley, and I'm the Technical Response Team Manager with Lube Tech. And so the Technical Response Team, just for a little background, is we're the people that our sales force and our customers come to for questions related to product application and product use and everything that goes along with that. For those of you who don't know who Lube Tech is, we are a manufacturer and distributor of high-performance lubricants, including fluids and greases and fuel improvers as well. We're an employee-owned company, and we're happy to say that this year we're celebrating 80 years in business, and looking forward to many, many more. So who is a Lube Tech? Now, my very first bullet point I'm about to contradict, and I'll explain that in just a second. So gone are the days of workers wandering around with a grease gun and an oil can. And I say I'm going to contradict that because not that long ago I was visiting a major non-wovens facility in North America, and we were doing a plant survey. And when it came to the subject of talking about their lubricant program, we started asking them, hey, do you have Lube Techs that work here? And they said, no, we don't. I said, well, okay, does the maintenance guys, do they take care of it? And they said, well, actually, no. And I said, okay, well, does it fall on the operators to do the lubrication at the facility? And they said, well, actually, no. And I said, well, my goodness, who's doing all the work? And they said, well, what they do on a monthly basis, 1 day a month, they shut down their facility for maintenance, and for 8 hours, they bring in basically day laborers and hand them each a grease gun, and they're assigned an area, and they're told to go find every grease fitting that they can and to put 5 shots of grease into every fitting. And that really blew me away. I thought, my goodness, this is a major company working on very expensive pieces of equipment, trying to keep them up and running, and this is how they maintain their equipment. So I say that hopefully the days of workers wandering around with a grease gun and an oil can are gone, but certainly they are not. And hopefully we can sort of bridge that gap and figure out a way to have a better trained Lube Tech and really maximize on what that person can do, because they really should be a well-trained asset. Okay, if you're going to spend the time to have a Lube Tech on board, you need to take the time to train them properly. They really are a plant's first line of defense for a finely tuned reliability program. And I challenge you guys that if this is not the case where you work, why not? What steps can you take to really maximize on this Lube Tech or on that department to really help you in your reliability program? So Lube Techs, they do walk around, they do walk a planned route, and they do apply grease and oil according to a specified work order. And that's ultimately, at the core of what they do. But they really can do a whole lot more. When they're properly trained, they can help the maintenance department identify areas of improvement and immediate needs for a smoother operation. They do have typically more frequent exposure to most applications. A mechanic typically will only see a piece of equipment, if something bad happens and it needs repair, or during a PM, whereas a Lube Tech is going to see that equipment in theory on a much more frequent basis. So they can and sometimes have a better idea of how that piece of equipment is running, and using their senses they can tell if something is gone amiss, and then they can notify maintenance of any issues that need to be rectified. It should be a trusted source of information. Okay, typically, and not always, I know this is not always the case, but a lot of times a Lube Tech might be a younger person. They might be new to the outfit, new to the company, and sometimes they're handed a grease gun and they're told just to go out there and do what they can. But more and more, that's the Lube Tech is a better trained person. But since they are typically younger, sometimes they might be given a hard time by the rest of the maintenance staff. But they need to be trusted, and they need to know that comments that they share and that they give back to the maintenance department are actually valued. And it sounds kind of simplistic to say that, but more and more times if they say something and nobody listens to them, then they're going to stop saying it, and then they will become that Lube Tech that walks around with their head hanging down, with the grease gun, going to apply grease, whichever way the work order applies. So you want to make sure that you certainly a little bit of a hard time for a new person is not unheard of and not necessarily a bad thing, but you want them to be a valued and trusted member of your team. So Lube Tech does need a wide variety of training in order to really impact a reliability program. It's not just how to use a grease gun, although hopefully you do provide that training. I have been witness to a couple of lube techs who don't know how to load a grease gun, and even some maintenance folks that have been in the business for quite a while. So obviously you do need to do that, have that kind of fundamental training. So the assumption is that any lube tech has participated in some sort of lubricant training. This might not be the end-all for all lubricant knowledge, but it is at least a starting point. Typically, I would encourage people to attend some sort of lubricant training from their lube supplier. There's also a couple of third-party trainers out there that will be happy to provide lubricant training, and that could be a 2 or 3 day crash course. And I would say that that's better than nothing. Is it going to be all the training that they will possibly need for lubricants? No, but it'll at least give them some backbone, some background information to really get a handle on what's going on, and hopefully that initial training will cover things like lube misapplication, lube mixing, and over and under lubrication, which really are some of the biggest issues that people have with lubricants. Just this morning, in fact, I took a phone call from one of our customers who was having an issue with the bearing, and it was simply the over-lubricated the bearing, and it was overheating. So a lot of times people think, a little bit of grease is good, well then a whole lot must be better, and obviously that's not always the case. So if you've been around lubricants for any period of time, you've probably seen this list before, but these are the rights, we call these the rights of lubricants. You have the right type, the right quality, the right amount, the right place, and the right time. Okay, I just got a weird message over my.
Yeah, Kenny, I think we're good. So
okay.
Yeah, keep going. Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. So these are the 5 rights of lubricants of lubricant usage. You have the right type, quality, amount, place, and time. We could spend, or at least I could spend, you might not be that interested in it, but I could spend days talking about just the 5 rights of lubricants. That's not really our focus for today, but hopefully the 5 rights of lubricants are covered in that initial training, because you want to make sure that your lube tech understands the lubricants that they're using and how they impact the performance of the equipment. This equipment, obviously these days is extremely expensive in some cases, and it does require, in some cases, a very specific lubricant. So you want to make sure that you're getting the right lubricant. You want that lube tech to know why he's using that lubricant, and he needs to know the best way to use it. So again, we could expand on this a little bit more, but that's not really the goal for today. So it's so much more than just lube training. Okay, hopefully you've covered the fundamental lube stuff with your lube techs, but there's so many other ways that a lube tech can influence your reliability program, and we're going to cover things looking at work orders, looking at lube rooms, walking to the job site, getting to the job site. What sort of functions can the lube tech do once they're there, in addition to just fulfilling the work order requirements? Going back to the lube room, and then I have strolling around, and I might refer to it as wandering around, and you might be saying, well, what is that all about? Well, we're going to cover that as well. And then at the very end, we're going to touch on some additional training that, depending on your program, you might see fit to offer to a lube tech in an effort to expand their base of knowledge. So it all starts when a work order is created, and the lube tech takes the work order and they review it. Hopefully they review it, and they're going to make sure that everything's hunky-dory on the work order. First and foremost, they should check with OEM books and manuals to make sure that what's printed on the work order actually makes sense. So how many people actually do that? I would say that maybe not as many as you might think. So let's get really fundamental here. Do you even have the OEM books and manuals? Are they up to date? Okay, does the work order match the OEM requirements? This is really important. A lot of times, especially with older equipment, sometimes we forget why it is we do certain things with them. Why is it that you lubricate this way? Well, because that's the way Jimmy did it for 42 years. Well, was Jimmy doing it correctly for 42 years, or has he been doing it wrong? Can your lube tech actually decipher and know their way around the lubrication manual? Internally here, we have an owner's manual that's for a major brand bottle labeler. And the OEM manual lubrication section is actually 62 pages long. Now, granted, of that 62 pages, the lube tech doesn't need to read all 62 to know how to work on that piece of equipment. There's about 20 pages in that section that are really of any value. So, but still, that's just one piece of equipment with over 20 pages of knowledge directly related to the work order and directly related to how that piece of equipment is going to be maintained. So ensuring that the manuals are available and that the work orders are accurate will help improve not only the Lube Tech's efficiency, but serves as an additional line of defense for scheduled PMs and unplanned downtime. The last thing that you want to have happen is for the maintenance department or somebody else scrambling to try to find an owner's manual to try to figure out what's going wrong. Especially this is critical for unplanned downtime. So let's let that Lube Tech sort of take on that role of organizing these OEM manuals and these books. Spend a portion of their day looking them over, making sure that they're up to date. You can even go out online and see if there's any updates that need to be added to the books. Keeping in mind a lot of this equipment, depending on the industry that you're in, is coming from overseas. So depending on time zone changes and when you have an issue, you might not be able to get that information as quickly as you would like. So you want to try to minimize that search, if you will, to try to find that any relevant documents to help you accomplish your job. So let's let's move on to the Lube Room here. So are the products in your Lube Room labeled properly? Is it clear and legible? And then we've got the new elephant in the room, which is GHS compliance. Are some of the symbols on the bottom, are they visible in your Lube Room? Anything not labeled? Are safety data sheets readily available? You say, well, why is this important? Well, we want that Lube Tech to be able to go into that Lube Room and be able to grab anything that he or she needs quickly, efficiently, and know that they're grabbing what they're supposed to grab. Okay? If it's not labeled properly or legibly, then they might not know what they're getting, and that gets you into that whole lube misapplication world. And again, we want to stress safety. Some lubricants, although most are pretty benign in their new form, there are some oddballs out there that need to be handled properly. So does your Lube Tech understand what these pictographs actually mean? Chances are they've already gone through some sort of GHS compliance training, so they probably do. But if they haven't gone through that training, then they probably should. While in the Lube Room, they should certainly check inventory levels. You want to notify the proper personnel if anything needs to be reordered as needed, because the last thing you want to have happen is you go to perform a work order, or in the case of maybe unplanned downtime, you don't have the lubricant on hand to perform the needed maintenance. And a tube of grease can cause a piece of equipment to shut down, or even worse, it could be down for quite some time. The Lube Tech should also take care of general housekeeping, any spills that they need to clean up, any rags or trash that needs to be thrown away. And then lastly, looking at bungs and lids and caps and valves, making sure that they're secure and in the correct position. A lot of times that Lube Room is not just going to be under the, it's not just only accessed by the Lube Tech, it's going to be accessed by the maintenance department. And depending on the environment, maybe some operators actually have access to do some minor maintenance and topping off of fluids. So a lot of people are coming in and out of that room, and it's incumbent on the Lube Tech to make sure that that room stays organized. So all three shifts, depending on the environment, can get what they need, get in there and get it, and they can operate in a very efficient and a timely manner. So here's an example of a Lube Room. I'm sure some of you guys have seen pictures similar to this, and you can see right off the bat by looking at the bulk tanks right in the middle of the picture, it's pretty easy to look at that and say whether you need to reorder or not. So these poly tanks allow you to get a quick glance of inventory levels. You can see that this particular room also has some spill containment underneath that. They've got transfer containers that are sitting on shelves, and that's a good thing as opposed to sitting on the floor. You can also take a quick glance at any breathers that may have been spent or maybe near to being spent, and that's a good idea, to take note of that and notify whoever might be responsible for that to make any changes, so therefore you can keep the product in a good, usable condition. And here's another picture of a Lube Room. This one hasn't even gone into service yet, and you can see right off the bat that those breathers are the big prominent thing that you see there. So your Lube Tech needs to know that those change colors as they're spent, as they get saturated with water. So they need to understand, hey, are there any inventory levels that I can address? Are there any valves that are leaking? Is anything not the way that it should be? The Lube Tech is going to see this stuff every single day, so they're going to have a good idea as to what goes where and how it's supposed to look. And if it doesn't look or smell right or sound right, then they need to take action to remedy that. My favorite are open drums and open valves on drums. Okay, make sure those bungs and valves are closed. Contaminants, lubricant contaminants are, aside from a food plant where water is the biggest impact on lubricants, particulate contamination for everybody else is the major cause of equipment failure. So having bungs that are not secure and valves that are open just invites all sorts of contaminants to get into that lubricant, which is then going to get into your piece of equipment and is going to cause some issues. So make sure that these are all closed and secure where as possible. And remember to please clean up your mess. The picture on the left, that's obviously a waste disposal area, but having rags lying around is not a good thing. You want to make sure that you minimize any contaminants that you might have just around. And the picture on the lower right there, that's actually new oil, and you can see you've got a disassembled pump on top there, lids from a pail, a transfer container there with a rag in it. I mean, that's a pretty poor example of what you don't want to have. So you want to make sure that you clean up your mess, because you have a cleaner room, you're going to have a more efficient operation. Grease gun storage, typically you want to store grease guns in an upright position, just like you want to actually store the new grease in an upright position as well. And so you can do that, hanging them on a wall like that. It's a very common practice on a pegboard like that. And then looking at breather inspection and replacement, we already mentioned that a little bit, but it's a good opportunity to take a peek at breathers as you're walking in and out of a lube room to make sure that everything's functioning properly. So the next job is to actually secure the lubricants that are required to perform the work order. With any luck, there's a lube cart of some sort that allows the Lube Tech to transfer the lubricants safely and efficiently to get to the work site. You don't want to have to lug a bunch of buckets and tubes and grease guns hanging off your belt. A lube cart makes that job a lot easier. This particular lube cart does have some transfer containers on it, some pumps, desiccant breathers on them as well. A lot of times you're going to filter that fluid from one container to the next, and then finally filtering it into the application, because you want to maintain cleanliness throughout. If you're using a transfer pump with filtration like the picture on the lower right, you want to make sure that the filters are dedicated to the fluid type, and you don't want to mix and match these filters, because a little bit of residue from one fluid to another can cause some pretty serious impacts on the lubricant itself. So an ordered lube room makes the Lube Tech's job infinitely easier, and of course that contributes to the overall success of your reliability program by allowing that person to do their job as easily and efficiently as possible. You want to minimize the lubricant contamination. Like I said earlier, aside from a food plant where water is the biggest issue, everybody else, it's contamination that gets into the lube. So cleanliness is absolutely critical. So you can get a pretty good idea of the condition of your equipment on the plant based on the condition of your lube room. So go check out your lube room and see how it looks. Next is something that might seem kind of simple, but transit time to the work site can be time well spent. Hopefully your guys aren't walking around with their heads down staring at the floor. Okay, as you're walking to the site, that Lube Tech's head should be on a swivel. Be on the lookout. Use your senses. You got your eyes and your ears, and you can smell, and you can get an idea of if something is out of place. So keep an eye out for whatever they can, anything that looks out of the ordinary. You can look for spills and leaks, any strange odors, and any other particular hazards. Another thing that you can look at and look for are any indicator lights that might be on any single-point automatic lubricators that are around the plant. If they are electronic, either battery or other powered, they typically will have an indicator light. They flash green or have a constant green light when everything's running well, and that'll turn red if the unit is not functioning properly or if the lube level is getting low. So keep an eye out for that. A lot of times these SPALs sort of go unnoticed in a plant, and as you're walking around, you can get a quick glance at these SPALs to get an idea if they're functioning properly. Once you get to the lube site, at the job site there, safety should be priority number one. If the equipment does have to be locked out and tagged out, then you want to make sure that your Lube Tech actually understands what that means, and they know their way around that they can actually perform the task of going through the lockout tagout procedure. So they need to be trained on that and know the significance of that. I know a lot of times equipment is going to be lubricated when it is down and not running, but still, depending on the application, you still might need to go through the lockout, tagout procedures just to be on the safe side. If possible, I know a lot of times there is, I don't want to say a conflict, but between maintenance and operation, but there's always a little bit of tension there because they both have agendas. But if possible, if the operator is around, have the Lube Tech, talk to the operator. Like I said earlier, that the Lube Tech probably spends more time with the equipment than the maintenance department. The operator spends more time with the equipment than the Lube Tech does. So take a little time to have a little discussion with the operator to see if everything's going okay with the equipment. Try to get some feedback, get a better understanding of how the equipment is running and any problems they might be experiencing. A lot of times that information will be conveyed from the operator to their supervisor, and sometimes it doesn't get back to maintenance. If you talk directly to the Lube Tech, it'll shorten that chain of command, if you will, and maybe get to maintenance a little bit quicker. Once you're at the job site, take a moment to survey the site. You don't want to just show up at the job site, jump right in, do your task. Step back, take a look. Is everything labeled properly? Does the work order match the job that you're about to perform? You want to make sure if you're supposed to work on unit number 5 that you're actually working on unit number 5. While you're doing whatever task that you're doing, you can inspect grease fittings, look at seals, and look at breathers, and check out sight glasses. These are the eyes and ears of the plant, so take a peek at all these little things. Even though your job work order might not really directly involve some of these things, go ahead and look at the entire piece of equipment to see if there's anything that needs any attention. Again, with the SPALs, you want to check lube levels, any indicator lights, any signs of excessive heat, which could show, it could present as bluing or dark surfaces, any visible wear or odors that are out of place. Where possible, look at hoses and belts and chains. If the machine is running, it's sometimes difficult to get an idea about belts and chains if there's any issues there or not. And investigate any leaks. And finally, look at pressure gauges. Now, I'm not advocating or saying that a Lube Tech needs to be an expert about everything, but they need to be familiar enough with the equipment that they can look at it and tell if something is not quite right. And they can report that. And they also want to be able to look at a piece of equipment to know if it's safe to work on. Okay? So when it comes down to actually performing the work order, if it involves topping off or draining and filling a reservoir, you want to make sure that you check the fluid level prior to doing that. That would be a good indication if there's any leaks, if it has been overfilled, underfilled, or if you have any fluid mixing. Keeping in mind that the Lube Tech is not the only one potentially doing work on that equipment. It could be a maintenance guy, or it could be the operators in some cases that have authority to do a little work on the equipment. So it's not always just the Lube Tech. So we want to make sure that that's getting the right fluid in at the right place at the right time. After you've done the job, you want to make sure that the work order actually reflects the proper way to perform the task. And if it doesn't, then you need to edit the work order. It needs to reflect the right way to do it so it is done safely. And it also needs to be clear to maintain continuity of the task if and when the personnel changes. With any luck, depending on your plant, the Lube Tech hopefully has aspirations to move up in the maintenance world, and so sometimes turnover in the Lube Tech world can be a little on the high side. So you want to make sure that those work orders actually do reflect what the task is at hand. So when it is passed on to the next guy, it is easier for them to get the job accomplished. So after you've done the job, after the work order is complete, go back to the site and inspect your work. Does everything look, sound, and smell the way that it should? Okay? Quick detection of any issues at this point can really be a big savings in the long run. If you can figure out that you screwed something up now, instead of running it for a few days or a few weeks and then having a massive failure, it's always better to fix it sooner rather than later. If the operator was not aware of any work that was completed, you want to make sure that you do notify them, and they can be another set of eyes and ears to keep an eye on things to make sure that everything is going as planned. And remember to clean up your mess. You don't want to leave a mess behind because the operator is certainly not going to appreciate that. In some example photographs here, once you get to the job site, making sure everything is labeled the way that it should. Make sure the labels are not peeling. Everything is good there. It is what it says it is, and it's to cover your on the safety side as well. Here's a picture of a sight glass that is actually leaking. You can see that there is oil that is pooling on the outside of the sight glass, and obviously that is not a good thing. The sight glass is also very difficult to see through. The sight glass is not just there for looks. I mean, there obviously is a function to the sight glass. If it's leaking, it should be fixed. If you can't see through it, that could be an indication that the fluid inside there maybe has oxidized, maybe it's starting to form some varnish and deposits. So if the sight glass is dirty, there's a pretty good chance that the insides of the equipment are also dirty. So maybe this needs to be addressed in the form of some sort of a repair or a flushing. Now, this sight glass looks like at one point it was actually painted over. I know that has happened, and probably is maybe even one or two in your facility that look like this. A painted over sight glass doesn't do you any good. A sight glass is not just there to show you the fluid level is correct. You can see with this picture that the fluid level is in fact right in the middle. It looks like it's where it should be. But you can get it, if you know what that fluid is supposed to look like, if it looks different, might be an indication that some fluid mixing may have occurred. You can also see maybe if any water has gotten into the system because it would turn milky in some cases. And if you see excessive foaming, then that could be an indication of I don't know, a handful of different things going on with that equipment. So the sight glass is very critical to be inspected on a regular basis. Grease fitting inspection, as the Lube Tech is doing his job, take a look at the grease fittings themselves. The one on the left looks like it's been painted over, has all kinds of debris on it. You want to be sure that the Lube Tech understands that any debris that is on that grease fitting, when you attach that grease gun, there's a lot of pressure generated by that grease gun, and any dirt and debris that is there is going to go into that bearing. Okay, so you want to make sure that that gets cleaned before you attach the grease gun to the fitting. Some places have little caps to go over that to protect that. I found that the caps work fine as long as they get replaced, but they do have a tendency of getting knocked off. So if that's the case, just make sure that you clean that off as good as you can. The picture on the right looks like a nice clean one, still freshly painted. This is off of an electric motor that hasn't even gotten to its first relube interval, so it should look very clean. Here's a long-term leaky gearbox. How do I know that? Well, you can look at this gearbox and you can see that there's oil obviously on the gearbox itself, and underneath you have a spilly pad that's completely saturated. So this tells me a couple of things. If the spilly pad is saturated, at some point it's not going to hold any more oil, and that'll eventually get on the floor, which can then pose a safety hazard or a safety risk. The other thing is, if there's that much oil leaking out of this gearbox, you can tell this gearbox is not very big. It doesn't hold a lot of oil. If that much oil is on the spilly pad, does the gearbox actually have enough oil in it to run properly? So the Lube Tech should keep an eye out for this kind of stuff. Who put the spilly pad down there? Could have been an operator, maybe never notified anybody in the maintenance department. Gearboxes tend to be on a much longer drain interval in some cases, maybe on the order of a year or longer. So it could be some time before a maintenance guy or even a Lube Tech gets by to take a look at applications like this. So while that Lube Tech is there, give a once-over where they can to look at all the equipment and see if there's any issues going on. Taking a peek at pressure gauges. Again, the Lube Tech doesn't need to know every in and out of the plant, but they need to make sure that they should have an understanding of what's normal, what's safe. If they see a gauge spike, do they need to get out of there and notify somebody? So they need to have an understanding of where they're working to make sure that they're doing a safe job and that nothing is about to go haywire. So after the work order has been complete, you want to return all the tools and the carts to their proper place, clean the grease guns and the transfer containers as needed. You always want to keep in mind that there's somebody else about to come into the next shift. You want to make sure that they show up to a nice clean environment, and the same thing goes for you. You want to make sure that everybody does that. Do unto others as they would do unto you, even if they don't. So you want to make sure that you clean up after yourself and return paperwork to the proper personnel. This might sound really simplistic, but I was at a facility once, and they talked about how the work orders rarely actually got closed. They would go out, and the actual work would be completed. But because the paperwork was never closed, sometimes that same work order would actually be issued multiple times and then completed again. So you have applications that are getting new lubricants and fresh oil on a much more frequent basis than they need, which is good for the machine, but not good for productivity of the maintenance department. So you want to make sure that you get that all returned to the supervisor so that the actual work order can be completed and closed out. And then you want to report any grease inventory and lube inventory levels so they can be replenished for future work. Being in the lube business, we get lots of phone calls from our customers who maybe didn't plan correctly, or they didn't realize that they were about to run out, and then everybody's scrambling to try to get the right lubricant to the site so they can complete the task and get their plant up and running. Waste oil, you always want to make sure that the waste oil makes it into the right waste stream. A large facility might have multiple waste streams, and you want to make sure that those waste streams are not cross-contaminated. Otherwise, it ends up being a much bigger expense to get rid of it. And make sure you get those tools put back where they belong. There's nothing worse than going to look for a tool and not being able to find it, or not being able to find a grease gun that you really do need. So getting to know your plant. This is what I was talking about at the beginning, wandering around your plant. That a Lube Tech should have some scheduled time in maybe once a week or once a month, depending on the workload, to just sort of walk around the plant. Not related to a work order. Okay, this is where they just have some time to walk around. I'm sure you guys have heard the term managing by walking around. So instead of a manager just sitting behind a desk and waiting to hear from their team, you actually get up and go talk to your staff. And in some cases, you might just sort of sit off to the side and watch. That's a really powerful way to get an idea about what's going on with your staff. Well, guess what? You can do the exact same thing with your equipment. So instead of managing by walking around, we're going to manage equipment by walking around. So the Lube Techs, they are the foot soldiers of the maintenance department, and they need to understand the facility where they work. So it's okay to have somebody just sort of wander around and get a look at things. When I do an initial plant survey, if possible, I ask them to let me just sort of walk around. Sometimes they let me, sometimes they don't. But you can learn a lot at a plant just by simply walking around and just looking, using your senses. And I encourage Lube Techs to do that so they get to know that plant as well as they can. So maximizing a Lube Tech, the lubrication technician position, like I said earlier, is a logical stepping stone to move up in the world of the maintenance department. And some natural avenues for that might be oil analysis, thermography, vibration, and ultrasound. So if you're confident in your Lube Tech and you want to expand upon that, these are 4 ways that you can really do that. Now, I know a lot of facilities have dedicated reliability teams and dedicated asset management teams, but some facilities don't. So they have a Lube Tech or other personnel that are sort of doing a lot of different things. So if you're confident, and hopefully when you hire that Lube Tech, you didn't just expect them to be a Lube Tech for the rest of their career. You should hire that person to realize, hey, they're going to move up, so I want somebody who I can promote and to do in some of these other tasks. A natural fit, especially for a Lube Tech, is an oil analysis program. The bullet points at the bottom are really what it takes to get a good oil analysis program in place. So the Lube Tech already knows a lot of this stuff. Identifying the equipment, taking a sample is not very difficult. Properly filling out the paperwork is probably the most cumbersome of these, but very trainable. Interpretation and getting the reports is going to take some time, but again, the Lube Tech is not going to necessarily be responsible for all of these, but they can certainly take a role in a lot of these. And then finally, the maintenance needed to perform to get the equipment back in running order. Tools for oil analysis can be very simple. Here's a snapshot. You've got a vampire pump, a sample container, some paperwork, and a tube. This is obviously very simplistic, but I'm just trying to illustrate that it's not that difficult. And a Lube Tech is a perfect person to move into the oil analysis world at your facility. Temperature measurements and tracking can be performed by a Lube Tech during normal activities. Depending on the plant and depending on the Lube Tech, you might not send them out with a really fancy thermography equipment in the beginning. It just depends on who they are. You might be a very simple temp gun, and it helps the Lube Tech get a better idea of what's going on around them And again, you're trying to expand on this person's knowledge base. So if you don't have a dedicated department that does this kind of thing, it'd be a good idea to sort of morph that Lube Tech into that role. Vibration is getting maybe a little more advanced. It's in terms of interpretation, but if you have the resources and you have the personnel, it's not a bad idea to sort of initiate a Lube Tech into sort of the maintenance and reliability world, if you will. And obviously, I would be remiss if I didn't mention ultrasound and the technology that goes along with that. So thank you to UE Systems for that. So again, just add that to the bailiwick of that Lube Tech. So in conclusion, any reliability program, obviously you guys are always striving for continuous improvement, and you want to capitalize on the personnel. Don't forget that Lube Tech hopefully has aspirations to move up in the world, and if they're willing and able, by all means train them, and don't forget about all the ways that Lube Tech can really help you. Lubrication technicians are absolutely critical. I find that they're usually the easiest ones to work with at any plant, so I encourage lots of good training for them. And they are the first identifiers of potential problems. I know around here we don't like the term problem identifier. We like problem solver. I know that's a little kitschy, but somebody has to identify the problem, okay? You can't fix the problem if you don't know it's there. So a lot of times that Lube Tech can be that first identifier. And please, I can't stress enough, educate your Lube Techs accordingly. I'd like to thank UE Systems, Maureen Gribble and Adrian for allowing Hydrotechs to be a part of their Lubuary and continued support in providing training to the lubricant field. It always makes our job a lot easier in the lubricant world when the end user is a better trained person, and so that, again, thank you for that quality lubricant training that they continue to provide. And a quick plug for Hydrotechs, we have a lubrication university where we offer extensive lubricant and fuel improver training as a part of our Lube U. We do have a 3-day Q school, which has been recognized by both SMRP and ICML, and it is accredited by Brookhaven College in Dallas, Texas. And there's my contact information. If you guys are interested in getting any further information on that, I'd be certainly glad to email with you guys. So with that, I am finished, and obviously here to answer any related questions.
Okay, great. Appreciate that, Kenny. Really good practical information. I will say this, if you've worked in a plant or a facility for 5 or 10 plus years, it's easy to walk around that facility with blinders on. You just kind of, get used to the way things are, the way things have always been. But really good practical information. Use all of our senses when we're out walking around in our facilities, and just being observant, using all of our senses, vision, hearing, smell. I mean, it's really important. So I would encourage each one of you to get out in your plant at some point, if not today, sometime this week, and just kind of walk around and look to see if anything stands out to you. And hopefully you won't be used as one of these examples in any future presentations or webinars. Let's see, we had just a couple of questions. One that came in deals mainly with, just wanted to know what your thoughts are as far as actually who performs the lubrication on the equipment, whether it be equipment operators or a dedicated Lube Tech, or even like an electrician. If they're responsible for an electric motor, this person's facility says that sometimes the electricians are responsible for greasing. Any thoughts on who should actually be doing the lubrication on the equipment? You may have alluded to it, I believe, with your mentioning the dedicated Lube Tech, but just get your thoughts on that, Kenny.
Yeah, I would say a dedicated lubrication technician is ideal. Obviously, that's not always possible. So I would say that lubricant tasks that are assigned to an operator or to an electrician I'm perfectly okay with that, as long as they've received good training and that they're not just flying blind out there. Good training is critical. If they know what they're doing, then I have absolutely no problem with that electrician working on electric, lubricating that bearing, or that operator, doing checking fluid levels and maybe even topping off. It all hinges back, though, did they get proper training to make sure that they know what they're doing?
Yep, I would totally agree with that. secondly, looks like, yeah, someone is asking if you have any resources available, and I'm sure you do, on cost justification, just helping to justify, lubrication improvements in their facility when it comes to storage and handling, and improvements made to the lube rooms. Do you have any resources like that, Kenny?
We do. I would encourage that maybe offline. If you want to, whoever that is, they can reach out. It varies, but we have seen where you get a well-tuned lube room, and in some cases there is a significant, depending on how big your plant is, investment up front, but it definitely returns in not too much time. So if whoever that is, if they want to reach out to myself personally, and I'll be happy to address that offline. Okay,
perfect. Yeah, and in regards to who actually performs the lubrication, we have a comment here that says, in my plant, the millwrights do the lubrication, and they feel that this job is below them and don't put much effort into it. Yeah, we haven't even really talked about the culture part of it, but we think about lubrication, really it's the lifeblood of your assets. It's very important, and a lot of people just really take it lightly. And I know me personally, I have the opportunity to go into a lot of plants and facilities on almost a weekly basis, and you see some pretty lackadaisical lube practices in facilities, but really it's very vital to the equipment operation and maintenance.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. If somebody thinks that it's beneath them, well, then assign it to somebody else, or demonstrate to them, just how expensive that piece of equipment is, and just how really important it is. If they want to have something to work with and work on, then it's kind of important that it gets lubricated properly. It shouldn't take up a big chunk of their time, frankly, and maybe they just need a little attitude adjustment. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe some training and some sort of reinforcement would be good in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that kind of brings us to our conclusions here. And again, we do apologize for the few minutes in the beginning where there was no audio. But again, we'll have this recording up on the web in just a few days, and so any content that was missed within the first few minutes, you can feel free to go back and take a look at that. Speaking of our website, we have a tremendous amount of resources on our website, application-specific tutorials, including the 3 webinars that we'll do for the month of February, or Lubuary as we like to call it. So anything that you're looking for application specific, we have that, as well as some product tutorials. So if you have some of our equipment, take a look at that. Also, training courses. We have a training schedule posted. Our current, what we have scheduled so far, level 1 and level 2 certification classes. So again, tremendous amount of resources that are all available to you at no cost. Also, get connected. If you're not on LinkedIn, we would encourage you to take a look at LinkedIn. It's a professional community of all sorts of peers from all sorts of industries. We also have a UltraPro users group and a Reliable Asset World users group on there, so check that out. It's a great way to post questions. We're on there on a daily basis. I guarantee you there's somebody on there from UE Systems on a daily basis checking that out and making sure questions get answered, as well as on Twitter at UE_systems. And then Lubuary is going to continue. We won't have a webinar next week. The next lubrication webinar will be on February the 17th, and that will be Mr. Terry Harris from Reliable Process Solutions. And another great topic, he's going to talk about payback for lubrication excellence. And would also encourage you to take a look at our ultrasoundworld.com website and reliableassetworld.com website. Those conferences will be coming up May 10th through the 13th down in Clearwater Beach, Florida. If you want to look at previous presentations, what's been presented, what can you expect, we also have some previous years Ultrasound World and Reliable Asset World presentations that are also archived on our website. So again, we appreciate you being a part of today's webinar, and thanks to Kenny for some great information there. And I'm just going to leave our contact information up here for just a moment. And again, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hear the first installment of our lubrication series for the month of February. Thank you.